is Sam Robinson, and this is the Gnostic Secretist Podcast. Thank you for joining us again tonight. Once again, I always want to reiterate that everyone is welcome here, no matter your background or belief system, for we are all seeking to unveil the occulted nature of our reality and the dystopian rise of transhumanist technocracy that is so obviously felt today in our world. In our last podcast, last two podcasts really, we're going over what I've called the rise of a spiritual dark age and how this has come about through multiple factors, methodologies, and dark occult elite strategies being deliberately engineered by an oligarchical dark occultic class that has been around for centuries and has been repressing and suppressing the spiritual development of the entire human race for a long time, but it is only now that we have the necessary information and knowledge at our fingertips and consciousness development that we are able to take a stand and rise beyond the matrix of control and the reality distortion strategies of this dark occultic elite oligarchy that conspires to run our world and to steer it into a dystopian nightmare of artificial intelligence, transhumanism, and a world government system of total and complete totalitarianism. And so in the last two podcasts, we went over the nature of psychospiritual warfare dialectics and the radicalization and polarization of the left and right wing conceptual frameworks for spiritual understanding and belief systems. And also we went over the spiritual vacuum that was, in a certain deliberate sense, engineered by the obstruction of the mission of the mystery school traditions, the white occult mystery school traditions of theosophy, anthroposophy, Rosicrucianism, and the esoteric Christianity from the two world wars and the aftermath in the post-war era, which allowed them to bring in Eastern gurus and New Age teachings to obfuscate and occult the esoteric mystery school traditions teachings, and white occultism that was gaining ground from theosophy and Rudolf Steiner and some of these other master teachers, Dion Fortune, Steiner, Heindel, and many others. And this spiritual vacuum has led to a dark age of spirituality, a spiritual dark ages for the last 7 decades, that instead we were penetrated by false Eastern gurus, New Age pseudo-occultism, scientific materialism, and the sociocultural atomization through overly rapid technological growth, and through the elites, industries, and technology companies, to where we are now today in a very quite dire position. And so that is a short review of the last two podcasts. And this podcast, I want to go over and what I would call, and what many have called, the war of conceptual frameworks and spiritual systems that have, in another sense, led to this paradigm, which is the ideas of natural law, objective morality, and the knowledge of the actual causal factors from the planes of causality and the mental and astral and spiritual spheres of reality that only become manifested down here in the plane of effects through intentionality and directed human imagination and thought form generation, which is the exact opposite of what we have obviously today, which is the opposite of natural law and objective morality. Instead, we have, what do we have? We have the rise of total moral relativism. We have the rise of so to speak, philosophical solipsism, the belief that you can know nothing and that there is no real objective knowledge in reality. And the idea that, that man's artificial laws are the only laws of reality, and that there is no natural law, besides laws like gravity, of course, and there are laws of physics, but there's no real natural law. There's no cosmic system for recalibration of equilibrium and karmic reciprocity of, energetic stresses for sentient beings to engage in a cause and effect style relationship with other sentient beings, and to have that balanced out in some sort of cosmic process that is unrelated to mankind's existence and has been around since the beginning of the stage of cosmic differentiation and manifestation, when this universe began. Of course, there's been an infinite number of universes, but this current one, it begins with cosmic differentiation, which generates the natural cosmic law that then permeates and interpenetrates the entirety of all of the planes of existence, from the highest spiritual planes down to the base, gross material plane upon which we exist in the 3D environment. So there is, in a certain sense, a war between these concepts, and one that is unfortunately seeing natural law and objective morality losing to moral relativism, solipsism, and artificial social constructs that have been deliberately generated and engineered by dark occultists from East and Western orders. And one of the first people I would like to at least give a shout out to and give an enormous amount of credit to is Mark Passio with his natural law seminars, which I highly recommend everyone watch. If you've never seen them, it's 3 videos, total of 9 hours, where he goes deeply into what the occult mystery schools calls natural law, which is the foundational structure of all of reality, and is there whether man believes it or not, whether they know it or not, whether we even exist or not. It's always been there and will be there until the end of the age, when all is reabsorbed into the absolute essence of reality, to be manifested yet again in the next universe. So there are such stupendous differences between natural law and man's artificial laws and fake legal systems, and it's become so ingrained and so conditioned as a social and cultural norm and conceptual framework for being in a society, that almost nobody questions it, and everybody thinks that what's legal is what's right. But who made what's legal? Well, men did. And who are those men? Well, they are lawyers, and they are politicians who get the lawyers to pass it. So it's completely artificial and arbitrary. Government is illegitimate on its face. The idea of authority is illegitimate on its face. No one has authority over anyone else in the cosmic superstructure. There's no such thing as authority. Authority is a construct. I think the patriarchy is a fucking construct. Excuse my French. No. The legal system is a total construct and has been engineered to suppress, repress, and control the mass of the world population for thousands of years, 10,000 years at least. And natural law totally supersedes man's artificial constructs of law, to the point that it's actually, in a certain large sense, totally unnecessary to have law systems created by men artificially, because reality already has natural law. Thus, putting natural law on paper is redundant, because it's already in existence and already in effect, whether you know it or not, like it or not, believe it or not, exist or not. Natural law is eternal, immutable, and objective in every way that it engages in the cause-effect process between sentient beings and whether they remain free or not, whether they are sovereign or whether they are enslaved. Natural law, which some, I guess you could call, some call what I call karmic reciprocity, and the law of cause and effect between action and reaction, and the weighing and balancing of sentient beings' actions between one another, already exists. It's already literally imprinted and imbued into the nature of reality. There is no need, really, to engineer and generate legal systems, which are largely arbitrary and designed for the corporate class to turn us into corporations and bypass common law concepts to make statutory law the law of the land, which is maritime law, the law between corporations. You are now a corporation. That's how they did that, by creating you into a corporation at birth, which then used to be the case. You used to only have common law, and the statutory law was only between corporations, between companies that were engaged in trade on the open seas, because those were the first real kind of corporations that came into existence, like the East India Company. And before that, you only had common law, and they have re-engineered our societies to have mainly statutory law, which totally inverts natural law concepts and has led to a very inverted system of interaction between us and the authorities that govern and rule over us, the ruling class, the governing class, the government. And really, it's not that government, it's the ones behind the government, the real dark occult elite, who just use government as a tool and a vehicle for their temporal power in this plane of existence. So, natural law is akin to the seven hermetic principles of mentalism, correspondence, vibration, polarity, rhythm, cause and effect, and gender. All these things are the laws of cosmic differentiation and manifestation that immediately begin when cosmic differentiation starts. And if you refer to the Kabbalah, the moment Kether is overbalanced and becomes Hokmah and Banah, this is when that occurs, at the very beginning of existence for this universe, for this Manvatara, Maha Manvatara, as the Theosophical Society would call it. There are many universes, one after another, in an endless cycle of periodicity, of the periodical ebbing and flowing and waning and generation and reabsorption of each universe, every time on a higher plane of existence, each time developing everything that was existing before in the next state of the universe. And all these laws supersede man's arbitrary artificial constructs of law, and they've had to work very hard to generate a system of legalism, not lawfulness, to totally enslave the Western populations under it. They had to do it subtly, they had to do it deceptively, and they had to do it incrementally to get to where we are today. So, on top of this, you have the bifurcation of concepts which relate to what we call morality. And there is true objective cosmic morality in existence, which is just the same as natural law. It is, in a sense, a natural law that governs the sovereignty of individuals and peoples and conscious beings, sentient beings like ourselves. And that is the karmic process that balances all things at the end, during each lifetime and after each lifetime and into the next one, every incarnation. It doesn't mean that it's easy to handle. It just simply exists, and whether you like it or not. So objective morality and versus what we call moral relativism, which is utterly saturated Western collective consciousness, so deeply that it's kind of mind-boggling in 2025, in the last days of 2025, to see and to hear so many people, including my siblings, when you bring things up that you call objective reality, objective morality, objective truth, or natural cosmic objective laws, they go, well, that's your truth. That's not truth, that's just your truth. Everyone has their own truth, apparently, because everything's relative. There's no such thing as objective reality, which leads into the idea of solipsism. Solipsism is that nothing is really true. You can really gain no true knowledge of reality, only what's true for you and what you think of your own reality. And so that every reality is just your perception of reality, and that's all that exists. So thus, everyone has different perceptions of reality. Thus, everyone has their own truth, is the illogical conclusion of this line of philosophical thinking and speculation. Somehow this has become the philosophical norm for much of my generation, the millennial generation, and Gen Z, and even some of the older generations who just don't really realize they are being psycho-spiritually reconditioned to believe things they did not formerly believe and would have been considered absurd to older generations, that they always knew there was subjective morality. It was inherent. It was an inherent understanding, like the laws of biology, which of course also become relative as well, and are, gender is not a hermetic law of reality. It is just a construct of the white male supremacist patriarchy, according to Gen Z. It was just created by us. It doesn't really actually exist. You can be whatever gender you want. It's relative, just whatever, anything goes. Just reality is what you want to make it. Whatever you perceive to be your reality is your reality. No, reality is reality, and it exists objectively outside of the observer. Now, we are interconnected with that same reality, just like quantum physics shows us, but it is not so plastic and elastic that everyone has their own version of reality. No, everyone is simply able to interact mentally, and their consciousness can affect the reality. It does not mean that your consciousness is reality, and each consciousness has its own reality inherent to itself. No, that is not how that works. There is a collective reality, and our collective consciousness and individual consciousness interacts with that reality on a quantum level. That does not mean that your quantum reality is your own, and thus you have your own truth inherent within that pigeonholed structure of societal tunnel vision. That does not exist. It is incorrect to say that it does, and you are wrong if you think so. There is an objective reality, and each plane, so there are thus planes of reality, and each plane beyond this plane, the material plane of Malkuth, is a plane of causality to the plane below it. So the plane above ours is part of the causal plane, which creates this plane of effects here, and the plane above that is the causal plane for that plane, and so on and so forth. So each plane before each plane is the causal plane of that plane, though some of the higher planes are also causal planes for all the lower planes. But you see what I'm saying? It's like a ladder and gradation of causality, going all the way up to the causeless first cause, the pre-cosmic essence and absolute unconditioned parabrahma of reality, which is Ein Sof in the Kabbalah. That is the original cause, the causeless cause, the unknown cause, the cause without a cause behind it, the prime mover, on the unmoved mover, as you would call it under Platonic philosophy. And then you go all the way down the chain of differentiated manifestation, each plane being the causal plane for the plane beneath it in densification and complexity, until you get down to this plane, which is the only considered to be the plane of effects, where things become objectified and materialized fully into our 3D reality. And the problem being, solipsism teaches that you can't know any of that, that none of that exists. You can't really know anything at all, actually. There is no such thing as true knowledge. Everything's just perception and relative to the perceiver, which is inaccurate and untrue, even though quantum physics throws in some plasticity to the concept of what we consider objective material reality, it doesn't mean that simply because the objective material reality is able to be affected by the mental plane through what they call quantum mechanics, that doesn't mean that there is no true reality. No, it just means that there's much higher degrees of interpenetration and permeability between causal planes of existence to the ones below that plane. And herein lies the major issue for what we call the truth movement and the, so to speak, the anti-New World Order movement and the different aspects and organizations involved in this supposedly aggregated movement of various causes, from free energy to alien disclosure to, anarchists to, John Birch Society and so on and so forth. The problem with this entire supposed truth and freedom movement is that the majority of them just don't understand natural law and the nature of the occult mysteries and occult laws of reality and occultism in general. They have no desire to learn any of that. They don't want to. They think that all they have to do is change something here on the plane of effects, which is incorrect. You must change the causal factors, which don't exist on our plane, our materialized plane. It's not relative. If you play around down here, you will get nothing, which is why nothing has changed. We have to change our moral and mental and spiritual structures, thought forms, and conceptual frameworks that will then cause a chain reaction of manifestation to be brought down the chain of manifestation into the actual material plane. So what do we have? So obviously that sounds difficult, but it's really actually quite simple. We have to reorient ourselves to the natural laws and objective morality of the actual real cosmos from the occult mystery schools. And we have to do that by changing our belief systems, by changing our pre-physical intentions and thoughts and patterns of behavior, which then manifest new physical actions here on the material plane that then create actual changing of effects from the dystopian ones they were before. But without that change in morality, without that reorientation, without that natural law understanding that it must come from higher planes to become manifested in the lower plane, no change will ever occur. And this is largely why no change has occurred. And God bless Mark Passio for all his hard work and his utter frustration in trying to make people and guide people to understand these concepts, these laws, and this process, which is initiated in the planes of causality, which is this point the mental plane, the mental planes. Even the emotional, which is the astral planes, are higher than this plane, and you have to fix the problem on those planes of existence to have it manifested in our physical world. Otherwise, there will be no change. Everything will just continue to be guided down this transhumanist dystopian path towards a technocratic world government without fixing the problem of moral relativism, solipsism, and man's artificial constructs of legalism. We will essentially, as far as I'm able to understand, get nowhere. And we will continue to march towards technocracy. And this is just so obvious to me more and more every day when people talk about their truth, your truth. That's relative. Well, that's your opinion. That's not your facts or your knowledge. Those are only opinions. Everything's just an opinion. Everything is relative. Everything is arbitrary. And that's a total inverted conceptual framework for understanding our reality, and it's meant to be that. It was engineered to be that way. 100 years ago, 200 years ago, people didn't think like that. We had real philosophical debates. We didn't debase ourselves with ideas such as, can we actually know anything at all? Not to mention, we already had that debate. Descartes already did that. So did Hegel and Schopenhauer and Leibniz and Spinoza. We've already had all these philosophical debates, and they had won the day. Objective reality, objective morality, and an understanding of natural law was already concluded. It was already concluded by these other philosophers, and somehow we have regressed and been diverted and devolved back into a previous state of existence when we still questioned whether there was any truth. And I don't even know if they were that bad back then. We're certainly that bad now, though. There is objective morality. It is absolute, and it is not my opinion. It simply exists, just like anything else would exist. But most people don't like to hear that. They want to hear that whatever culture you're in, whatever society you exist in, whatever religious belief system that you adhere to, that's morality. That's the true morality. And that is not the case. There is some moral teachings in all the different religious systems in the world, but there's plenty of their teachings in all those systems as well, that are totally incorrect and lead to slavery and moral degeneracy and, disequilibrium in our societies. Just because it's religious law doesn't mean it's correct. Just because it's governmental law doesn't mean it's correct. It has to be in alignment with human sovereignty, human freedom, and natural law. And that is objectively true. And one of the best ways to kind of comprehend what I'm really saying here is something Mark Passio calls the law of freedom, which I'm pretty sure he came up with this himself, I think, which is the governing dynamics and natural law, which is always in effect. And what he says and what it says is, in essence, that as aggregate morality increases in a species, aggregate freedom and sovereignty and spiritual evolutionary development increases in that species. And as aggregate objective morality decreases and is replaced with moral relativism and solipsism, I'm adding in those two things, he didn't say exactly that. As that aggregate morality decreases, human freedom, incidentally, also decreases, as well as human sovereignty and our spiritual development as a species. It is a law of nature. And so why are we in the state that we're in today? With technocracy on our doorstep, artificial intelligence destroying our mental and frameworks and ability to concentrate, and our own autonomy as individual productive beings in our societies, and transhumanists literally not even hiding, being totally out in the open at this point. Well, it's because our morality is totally disintegrated, and they've engineered that. I can easily look back over the last 6 decades and see this shift. You can say it's natural. I can tell you absolutely not natural changes in morality. Morality doesn't normally degenerate that quickly. It's never happened really all that often in history. Cultures don't shift morality that fast. In 6 decades. It takes centuries. Normally. This was designed and engineered by sorcerers of consciousness and experts in psychological warfare and social engineering. they convinced you and conditioned all of us to change our morality slowly, incrementally, over the last 7 decades, to become the debauchery, the degeneracy, the moral relativism, and amoral, narcissistic societies we are today, in a trance state, focused entirely on our own needs, regardless of our neighbors. And that's not everyone, there are always exceptions, but it is a cultural norm at this point. Popular culture is exactly like that. And it had to be created. It had to be generated and manufactured. It would not have happened naturally, not that fast. Every culture eventually degenerates. It normally takes a lot longer than that, though. I mean, you can look at Rome. Rome took hundreds of years to do that. From their height in the Augustan age all the way to the end of the 400s, to 415 when Hypatia was ripped apart in the streets by fanatical Christian mob, by the on the orders of Cyril, the Bishop of Alexandria. It took 415 years for that to occur. We just did it in 6 decades, to where we are ripping apart our own traditions and mores and norms and former moral behaviors. We're ripping them apart in the streets in just 6 decades, to where you can't even recognize society anymore from when my parents were born. It was a very different world back then. And in a large sense, a better world. But it can be good again. But we have to have an understanding of natural law and objective morality. And the occult nature of the planes of causality, and how the chain of manifestation works. How thought forms become physical action. But the thoughts occur first. That's why the first Hermetic law is the law of mentalism. The universe is mental. The universe is consciousness. Consciousness pre-exists the physical body. The subtle bodies existed first, and the physical body is built around it. No physical action takes place before the thought occurs. Thus, our thoughts are the driving force of all physical activity, and thus of our sociocultural changes of physical reality. And if we can change our mental concepts, our frameworks of consciousness, and our systems of belief on the mental, moral, spiritual planes, we can then bring that down into manifestation in our actual material societies, and, so to speak, regenerate our world from the total darkness that it's becoming enshrouded in nowadays. And it's really kind of disgusting to behold at times. It really is. And hard to stomach. But stomach it we will, because that's the job. That's the mission. That's what we must do. We must wade through the darkness to get back to the light. And humanity can do that. I fully believe we can do that. But we're probably going to have to do it pretty quickly, because it's getting bad out there. And if this is simply a natural occurrence, that'd be one thing. This is a directed agenda, and they're moving absolutely as rapid and as fast as they possibly can orchestrate all these agendas to come to their focal point and apex of their strategy. 2030 is not far away. It's 4 years away. 5 years, 4 or 5 years away. And that's phase 1. Phase 2 ends in 2045. And so, I mean, you might say that's a lot of time. It's not for this first phase, obviously. But people need to act. People need to become reinvigorated and reoriented to objective morality and natural law concepts, and try to really truly understand these causal factors that are generated from the higher planes of reality, and how they come down to this part of the reality, the material plane. Otherwise, there will be no change in our societies. And so I once again want to thank Mark Passio for all of his decades of hard work and teachings for free to the general public on natural law, occultism, and everything else that he's put out into the digital sphere. He is an inspiration to all of us and a hero to humanity for doing it all for free and doing it as well with the quality he's done. And thank you, Mark Passio, for all your hard work. And we will talk more about natural law and the absolutely insidious nature of moral relativism and solipsism that has fully saturated and permeated our sociocultural matrix of what we call the new normal. So my name is Sam Robinson, and this is the Non-Secretist Podcast. Thank you for watching, and we will see you next time with another deep dive in the last episode on this spiritual dark age and these concepts that are driving it and are the epitome and very essence of this spiritual dark age that we are going to get ourselves out of. Ladies and gentlemen, have a good night.